Okay. I'm very privileged today to introduce to you Laine Lawson Craft. She is a best-selling, award-winning author, speaker, parenting expert, and visionary leader. Her personal journey of marital restoration has inspired thousands. Her book, Start Again from Scratch, a no-fail recipe for reviving your marriage, has touched countless lives, offering hope and practical guidance for couples seeking to rebuild their relationship. She also hosts the podcast Warfare Parenting, which is such a great title for a podcast. It ranks at the top 10% of podcasts globally, which proves that other people think it's a great topic as well. Through this platform, she equips parents with biblical strategies to navigate the spiritual battleground of raising children in today's complex world. Laine, thank you so much for meeting me here today. I'm so eager to hear what you might add to the article that you recently had published in Authority magazine. Your
Nancy,
journey.
yes, go ahead. I'm so sorry. I was just going to say I'm so thrilled to be here. I really am, and to be featured in Authority magazine. What an honor.
It's a pretty amazing publication. Your journey as an author and podcaster began with a very dark period in your marriage with Steve. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that experience?
I would be more than happy to. Nancy, what it was, I don't know how many of your listeners and viewers and readers can understand this. Life began to layer for Steve and I. We were married. We both were entrepreneurs, so we owned our own companies.
Mhm.
So that in itself was pretty stressful. You know, we pay our own taxes. We have our own 401ks. We paid for our own health insurance. I mean, incredible responsibilities owning your own company. And that was
Yes.
stressful. And then we had two miscarriages, trying to have a
Ouch.
family.
Ouch.
And then God blessed us really well. And we had three children in less than 3 years. But the baby, Kaylee, was preemie. And so she really struggled most of her life up until the last 5 years with her health. And so
Mhm.
here we were self-employed, a lot of stress, and then some tragedies, and then had three children in a row under three. And I like to say our life's just layered. And I know somebody listening today understands bills, kids, work, everything was just layering and getting very, very difficult.
It's rarely ever
Well,
just one thing, is it?
no, 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 it's not. And Steve and I really started to get resentful towards each other.
Mhm.
We were mad. We were stressed out. We were tired. We were exhausted. And we, at that point, at this dark moment you're talking about, were living on separate ends of the house. We were
Okay.
so miserable, but we were also very financially strapped. We didn't have the opportunity to go set me up in a new apartment with electricity and phone. And at that time, we had phones in the house and things like
Yes.
that. So, because of finances, we had to live under the same roof, and it was pretty bad. I like to say that we had a really awful dance together. And
Uh-huh.
what happened with us, we were pretty smart people.
Uh-huh.
We were being successful, and we both had grown up with religion. And I call it religion at this point because
Mhm.
we checked the boxes. We went
Yes.
to church, we tried to do the right things, we were good people.
Yes.
But what was missing, Nancy, is we had never really had a personal, intimate relationship with God until
Mhm.
this very moment. And what happened? We were so sick of each other, and we were just really to the point where we were going to have to separate, even me
Mhm.
getting out of the house at some juncture. We looked at each other and said, we're in our 30s. You're not going to spend the rest of your life alone, and you're not going to spend the rest of your life alone. why don't we call upon this God that we say we believe in and see if he would provide a miracle for us to start over again. And so we grabbed our hands. I mean, we were just, I love to say, I think Steve had just put out a cigarette. I probably said a few things I shouldn't have. And what I'm trying to say is we weren't cleaned up. We weren't perfect by any means. Matter of fact, we were pretty broken. I like to call
Yeah.
myself Humpty Dumpty. At that point, Nancy, I was Humpty Dumpty. I mean,
Yes.
everything in my life was broken. And we just reached our hands out and said, if we're going to start over with somebody else, see, Nancy, because remember, we were saying, I'm going to marry somebody else,
Hmm.
and you're going to marry somebody else. But wait a minute, if we're going to start over, could we possibly start over again with each other
Well,
and
and
call God into it? Yeah.
starting over with someone else always sounds easier, but it turns out most of the time to be much more difficult.
Yes. Yes, it does. And I like to say to women that come to me, I knew what I was dealing with Steve. Yeah, there were some ugly parts of him and things that needed
Mhm.
work and all, but I knew what I was dealing with. When you start over with another relationship, particularly with kids involved,
Yes,
careers, we're adults now. You don't know what past they're going to bring to that relationship.
right, right. They're gonna bring their own past with them, the way you are bringing your past. I I made a mention, uh, later in the interview, but we might take care of it now, that there was at one point, it must have been that point where you, uh, literally in desperation cried out to God and said, "If there is a God." Do you wanna share a little bit more about that moment of desperation?
Yes, and I have to say, as I look back to that, that was the anchor for the rest of my life, meaning
Mhm.
religion brought me nothing.
Yes,
Religion failed us, actually,
yes,
because here we both were raised in the South, raised with these biblical principles,
right.
but we were not in relationship. And so I hope that speaks to somebody today. We
Yes.
were not in relationship, we were just in religion. And so it was desperate. And I love to say, I love Psalms 41, where it says, I was in a miry pit.
Mhm,
And Nancy, I was in a miry pit. I
mhm.
mean, everything was bankrupt in my life. And yet, God had the mercy and grace to pull me up and Steve up out of this pit. And we dared him. That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
We dared God. If you're for real, if you're this guy, this God
yes.
that we've been calling out to all of our lives, but not in a relationship, but in religion, if you're
Mhm,
real, will you show up? And I'm telling you, Steve really speaks it so well in the book because he
mhm.
believes it was his first real miracle in his life in his late 30s that he saw the hand of God because he said he immediately looked at me with different eyes. And we had a
Wow,
lot of forgiveness to do, Nancy.
wow. In at one time in my very early marriage, I literally lay down on the floor on my olive green shade carpeting and said, "God, I will do anything to change the trajectory of this marriage if you will just tell me how." And a couple days later, I was on the phone with my husband, and he said something that normally would really trigger me. And I clamped my mouth shut and I said, "God, if you're going to help me, you better help me now," to say something other than what I want to say. And the words came out of my mouth, "Okay, sweetie, I'll see you when you get home." And it changed the atmosphere in our marriage over the next few months. So I know what it's like to be in that desperate stage, and later in my life, I found myself in that stage again. You refer to the process of restoration as a recipe. I love that analogy. I know you can't cover all the tips of the recipe, all the ingredients, but what is one that really stands out to you?
I think I'm sitting here with my book open because I just really wanted to make sure. First, want to just pre-qualify one thing, Nancy, because I don't want to come across Pollyanna. What I mean by that,
Mhm,
I don't want people to think, oh, you just grab each other's hands, call out to God, and things, miraculously were just perfect. Listen, this is what I say. We were believers.
Mm-hmm.
Both believed equally in the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
And we had those roots. I've got a
Yes.
lot of friends, even family members, that did not have that equally yoked relationship in faith, biblically sound anchors. So,
Yes.
what I want you to know, if you're out there and you go, Laine, my husband or my wife wasn't a believer, right there, I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I am trying to say is you both have to want it 110%.
Yes.
One of you
Agreed.
can't fight for this marriage. It's a covenant. It's a
Mm-hmm.
triangle, and it's you, your wife, or you and your husband, and God. And so,
Okay.
you've got to believe in that power,
Yes.
and then you've also got to want it 110%. So I want to pre-qualify that because one of the things that probably messed me up early on in religion was I thought if I lived right and did right, my life would turn out perfect and
I
perfectly
know.
right.
That's such a myth, isn't it?
Isn't it? And I think a lot of that was that religious spirit. So I
Yes.
just want to make sure everyone knows, listen, I know marriage is tough in good days because, we're having to live with someone for the rest of our lives, good, bad, and ugly.
Uh-huh.
But particularly if there's a deficit in your spiritual capacities, it's
Mm-hmm.
harder. So, but I would say out of all the chapters, I would say the secret sauce, chapter 2, and that's forgiveness.
Uh-huh.
I think we have a lot of pride. We all do.
Yes.
Particularly in a bad marriage, because see what happens, I believe, is bad behavior mirrors bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Many
Definitely.
times we're equally guilty, I guess is the word. So
Mm-hmm.
the power of forgiveness is the secret sauce because Steve and I looked at each other and we just had to create a clean slate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I say, Nancy, it took God. Because listen, if you've been betrayed in marriage with adultery or with finances or with
Mm-hmm.
pornography or
Mm-hmm.
some kind of addiction, that is not in your human capacity just to say, oh, I forgive
No,
you.
no.
It takes the Holy Spirit inside to say, listen, God, there's been some horrible things that I've done or we've done or he's done.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to help me. I'm going to partner with you to help me fully forgive my mate. And
You're counting on God to bring the power into your intention to actually forgive.
yes, and it
Good.
does take his power. Listen, it is not easy when you've been betrayed
Mm-hmm.
or any of those things to say, "Oh, I forgive you." It's very difficult. So I again want to mark that that's hard to do, but with the power of God or partnering with God, it
Mm-hmm.
all things become possible. I want to say too, somebody might want to be out there and say, how do you forgive? Why would I forgive? I know personally, I was holding so much poison inside. I was so angry and I
Mm-hmm.
was counting tallies. I like to say we were both tallying our mistakes or our offenses in the marriage. And
Keeping a ledger on each other.
yes. And I know that when we forgave one another, there was just such an inner peace that I had not had in a long, long time
Mm-hmm.
because I let go of all of those negative emotions, Nancy,
Yes.
that were literally eating me alive. Not they weren't eating him alive, they were eating
Yes.
me alive.
Yeah, it's poison to our bodies as well as our spirits, isn't it? You mentioned that regular date nights and daily check-ins are non-negotiable. I love that term, non-negotiable. How did they contribute to the healing of your marriage?
Well, again, we both were entrepreneurs. We had 3 kids right in a
Mhm.
row. We had to learn to prioritize our marriage. I mean,
Yes,
because everything's going to get in front of it,
yes.
bills, work, all of that. So we just said, listen, when we started again from scratch, we meant it. We started dating again, Nancy. We had
I love
date
it.
nights.
I love it.
I mean, and you think that just there's no way, but really it's if you make that decision, it's a choice. It's a choice.
Mhm,
After you forgive one another, you say, look, we're going to nurture this like we would if we never knew each other. We're going to dress up. We're going to go eat,
mhm.
and those things. And so it was pivotal because it established that you're important to me. I'm going to make time for you
Yes,
in my schedule,
yes.
but it also gave us an opportunity to rebuild the love that we once had, but had just
Mhm.
almost been non-existent.
I think courtship should never end. You know, we need to court each other for the rest of our lives. I love that that was part of your healing process. Would you tell us about the rock method?
The rock method. I love that. Well, as you can tell, I love to talk.
Uh-huh.
And Steve does too. What's really funny, he's a man of few words. So people really do listen to his wisdom, but sometimes he gets a little carried away. And particularly for me and him, and when we were in discussions, well, the rock process is you literally hold something in your hand, particularly when you're talking about things that are intimate in the marriage,
Yes.
things that are contentious in the marriage, things that you need out of the marriage that maybe you're not getting. So you hold a rock
Mhm.
and you have a certain time limit, and
Mhm.
then you hand it over to your partner. That way, there's equal distribution of thoughts, equal
Mhm.
distribution to respond, and no one kind of takes control of the direction, if that makes
Makes
sense.
perfect sense. So there's only one speaker at a time, and the other's job is to listen. And holding something in your hand to designate that you're the speaker helps keep the roles clean.
Yes.
I have my couples use what we call a talking stick, but it can be anything, you know, a pen or anything. Okay, I've coached couples who wake up to an empty nest and don't know what to do with each other. In marriages that go the distance, which we all want our marriage to do, we must transition into different stages. What do you recommend to help couples adapt to a new phase in their marriage, such as the empty nest?
Well, I think everything in the empty nest changes. That usually coincides with retirement, looking at when am I going to retire? When am I going to wind down? Particularly for Steve and I, we're being entrepreneurs. We're discussing how do we exit out of this?
Yes.
Which Steve said it this morning, Nancy. He said, I've built all my life, I've been a builder. And
Mhm.
now I'm relinquishing that to just being, taking care
Yes.
of my health, taking care of us. And we said this morning that we are transitioning to grandparenting. I mean,
Yes.
nothing else in this world at our stage can take the value of a loving, nurturing relationship with our children and
Mhm.
now our children's children.
Mhm.
So our thoughts are now more about building legacies for the next generation and the generations to come. So we're kind of shifting right now in this. How
Mhm.
do we want to do that? And we're really mapping it out. How do we want to do
Mhm.
that? And I think the most important thing, the currency is time now.
Mhm.
Currency used to be money, putting it in the bank, making
Yes.
it, paying the bills.
Yes.
So now in the empty nest, your currency becomes, who do I want to spend my time with?
Yes.
Who's most important? And you start building into that. And that's where the joy, that's where your sense of purpose, because those are the things that kind of get lost because we're not able to go run 10
Mhm.
miles. We're not able to do physically what we used to. You're spiritually more wisdom. You've got more
Mhm.
wisdom because uh, this passes. We're not going to
Yes.
get to take any of this with us when we leave
Yes.
this world. And so it's really kind of a neat start over too, really, because you start over again from scratch as empty nesters. What do we want to do till we leave this world? What impact and influence now that our jobs are not priority and all of this? What do we want to do?
So whenever there's a big change in circumstances, you have to also adapt the marriage to the new circumstances. I love the concept of leaving a legacy. We all leave a legacy, and it's up to us whether the people we leave behind love our legacy or wish they could change, you know, the legacy that they receive. You and Steve, the work you've done on your marriage and the ministry that you have helping others save their marriages is such a powerful legacy to leave to your children and grandchildren. when my late husband and I did the work to save our own marriage, every one of our 5 children came to us at various times and thanked us
Yes.
because they didn't want to inherit the legacy of divorce. So,
Yes. And
you know,
and I'll tell you, Nancy, there's an all-on war against families today.
yes.
Everything is pulling families apart. And I feel like Steve and I were forerunners. I think the key is being transparent, like you're saying.
Mhm,
If we don't open up to our children and our children's children on the struggles that we encountered and overcame, then they'll think they're the first, or they won't have the tools and the resources to win the battle. And
mhm,
so I honor you and your ex-husband, I mean, not ex-husband, but your husband that's passed, that you took that on, that authentic marriage.
mhm.
You
Yes.
said, yes, we made some mistakes, but we're going to make them right. I
Mhm.
believe that's the key, don't you, Nancy? To
Absolutely.
yes,
It
yes.
it transformed us individually as well as transforming our marriage. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the work that we did together and the awareness that I still have that I have his support with me. So you
And
mentioned in your article the power of appreciation. Would you explain a little bit more about that?
well, I think again, in the struggles, in the challenges, it's hard to be grateful about too much, right? Especially your
Yes.
mate. And
Yes.
so I literally would, and I'm telling you, full on, I would make a list. Thank you, God, that Steve makes making a living a priority.
Uh-huh.
Because he was the breadwinner. And I
Mhm.
used to see what isn't this interesting? That's a reframe because what used to make me so angry, Nancy, was that he did put work first and
Yes.
I felt left out and left behind. And I'm doing all the kid stuff and cooking
Yes.
everything and doing everything. But see, it ended up being something that I appreciate. Thank you, Lord,
Mhm.
that my husband wakes up and goes to work. I mean, Nancy,
Yes.
you know that's epidemic right now.
Yes. You're right.
Yes. So I just started making a list of what I was grateful for. And he too, we both, and this isn't it wonderful when you start being grateful
Mhm.
and appreciate one another. There's just a kindred spirit. There's just a enduring love that is indescribable because you're saying
Yes.
to that partner, I love you inside and out, and I'm so grateful for this quality or grateful for that
Yes.
quality, and so that's very powerful.
I think that appreciation or gratitude changes the spirit of the relationship in a real mysterious way. And yet, when I learned to verbally also give my husband appreciation, not thanking God, yes, but also thanking my husband,
Yes.
it lit up his face,
Yes. Yes.
made
And I
such,
still see that today, Nancy.
yes,
As we are shifting to empty nesters and retirement and all of those things. I mean, it still to this day lights Steve's face up when I say, thank you. Thank you so
mhm,
much for doing that. It really
mhm.
means so much to me. And it's just who doesn't like to be thanked and appreciated?
I don't think any of us get more than enough appreciation.
No.
It's just um, no one gets more than they need. We can laugh, and whatever we pay attention to positively increases. So, whatever you want to increase in your partner or your marriage, you want to notice it and appreciate it.
Yes, very much so.
So, one of your tips was to choose loving actions even when you don't feel love. How come?
Oh, well, again, I say love is a choice. I mean, it's not a choice. Well, what is it? What is love? It is a choice. It is a
Mhm,
choice. There may be times that I did not want to love Steve. I mean, we could have had a riff, or maybe he was just being sullen. So I began to say, although I don't feel it, although,
mhm,
I'm not feeling those love, warm feelings,
mhm.
am going to do some actionable things. I call it mirroring. I don't know
Yes.
if you're familiar with that, but I started to mirror to Steve, in spite of not feeling those ooey gooey love feelings, what I needed, you know.
Yes.
And I put in the book, Steve would write little love notes. at the coffee pot. I cannot tell you, to this day, that's one of my most adorable and wonderful things he does. It's just so special. That's an action of love.
Yes.
Those are so important. Figure out in your marriage, what can I do when I'm not really feeling the ooey gooeys and oh, warm and fuzzies? What could I do? What do I need that I would feel love? Would it be pour a bubble bath and say, you're not going to believe it, I poured you a bubble bath because I know you've had a long day?
Uh-huh.
Something like that. I've got a friend whose husband adores her with flowers.
Mhm.
Not she doesn't take it for granted, but just he'll just come home from the grocery with a beautiful set of flowers, and it just makes her day. That's an action
Mhm.
love. I believe love is action.
Yes.
Love is action. Don't tell me you love me. I mean, I
Mhm.
want to hear it, sure, but
Sure.
it's almost like I need those actionable things to reinforce the words.
Yeah. It's like the building blocks. The actions are the building blocks that create a lasting, loving marriage. Every marriage experiences conflicts. That's pretty much inevitable. What are the strategies for managing conflicts in a way that strengthens the relationship rather than weakens it?
Well, again, Steve and I are both pretty strong-willed people. So
Uh-huh.
before we had this, resurrection and transformation in the dance that we had, we would go head to head. And
Mhm.
so we did have to make some real changes in that. And I think the greatest thing I could give today would be agree to disagree.
Mhm.
Because God made us all different. We're all unique. If we were all the same, it'd be real boring. So
Yes.
again, when you're in that conflict, there
Yes.
may not be a resolution you both agree on. And that's something that was revolutionary for us, because we kind of, I guess, felt like we needed to agree on everything. But no
Yes.
two people, no matter how much you love each other, are going to agree on everything. So I think that was pivotal for us to say, okay, I heard your opinion and point of view, and he heard my opinion and point of
Mhm.
view. And we didn't judge or hold grudges. We said,
Mhm.
well, this is a point. We'll agree to disagree.
Okay. You also mentioned the importance of the counseling that you got, that your counselor taught you some of these skills that you didn't have naturally.
Right. Right.
So maybe can you list a few of the skills that you were taught by your counselor that you wouldn't have known how to do otherwise?
So many of them, Nancy. I give counseling so much credit. What that is an action step.
Yes.
It says, I say in the book, Steve and I, again, owning our own companies, we said if we're going to start again from scratch, we're going to make this a priority. One of the things that it was is counseling.
Mhm.
Nothing came before counseling. Not a business meeting,
Uh-huh.
nothing. Yes, and so we went to counseling a lot. And again, I don't want money to be an issue. I want y'all to hear me. We put our counseling on a visa because
Mhm.
we did not have the money, but we knew we needed the help. So
Mhm.
we put it on a visa. And Steve will say to this day, it was the best money he's ever spent. Things we learned in counseling was the rock principle. We didn't
Yes.
have that. We had to learn that. We also
Yes.
learned that marriage is a dance. I use that a lot now. We were in
Mhm.
a awful dance that was not working for 17 years, Nancy. We were
It's a
in a
long
terrible dance.
time to be miserable.
Yes, yes. So counseling, I say, is pivotal. I do believe this too, Nancy, because I am so strongly opinionated about that. I do
Mhm.
believe a believing counselor is best,
Mhm.
because they know the anchors of faith and the principles,
Yes.
and they live them themselves. Number
Uh-huh.
two, shop around. Listen, I've got a lot of couple friends that the first one wasn't it, and that kind of
Yeah.
discouraged them. And I'd say, go back to a different one. So shop it. What I mean by that, make sure you like them, that you can open up to them, particularly if you're the female and the male. A lot of times
Mhm.
men are kind of resistant on this. We want them to really like it. And I will also add my opinion on this. Steve and I went to the same counselor. I
Mhm.
went on Monday, he went on Wednesdays, and we went together on Fridays. Let me tell
Uh-huh.
you why. We were on the same page with her,
Yes.
meaning there weren't two stories and two different counselors trying to figure
Yes.
out who's right and who's wrong and what we need to do. So I believe with everything in me, a couple needs to go to the same counselor.
Yes, I agree with that as well. And I love that you said to shop around. Jim and I tried 3 different therapists before we found one that worked for us, worked for both of us. She saw us individually and as a couple, but as you said, she was getting the same story. You know, it wasn't, we didn't give her the opportunity to take sides.
No, and I'll tell you what was interesting. The revelation from the counseling going to one counselor was to prove that we both were core people, very
Yes,
similar. I mean,
yes.
we believed the same things. We wanted the same things. It's just
Mhm,
that life got in the way, Nancy. But if I were going to one counselor and he was going to another, they would have never known the congruence of
mhm.
our lives in our core and our who we are.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've had couples come to me for coaching who have had a counselor tell them they should get divorced. And that's not my message. You know, my message is to use the marriage to do your personal work and to save, to heal yourself and to heal the marriage. So I want to thank you, Laine, so much again for being with me today. This video will be linked to your written uh, article on Authority Magazine within the next few days. I'll let you know when it goes live. But meanwhile, if you would like to contact Laine, you can find her on Facebook, Laine Lawson Craft, and Laine is Laine, Lawson Craft, or look for her book with the most intriguing title, Start Again from Scratch, a no-fail recipe for reviving your marriage. Laine, thank you again for this morning. Whoops, sorry. I'm going to stop the recording and then maybe we can visit a little bit more.
Great.
Pause.